Thank you for joining us today. We're going to give just a few minutes with everybody hop in. So good evening. It looks like we've hit a surge in our attendance, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Valerie Brown. I'm the Senior Program Officer with United Policyholders. With me today are Carrie Waite, she's our Colorado coordinator, Catherine Wilson, who is with CZ Fire in California 2020, Neelam, who is with the 2017 North Bay fires. And then in the background, we've got Carolyn Winters, who's doing our tech support today. So thank you for joining us. This workshop is a little different than most of our others, and that while we do have a PowerPoint, we're going to be going, this really is about troubleshooting. So if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to put in the Q&A on the bottom of your screen, put your question in, and we will either get you an answer or pose it to the larger panel here. And what that simply means is, as we're doing this workshop, just because there's something on the screen does not mean that we will not be also taking questions and answering them then. So without further ado, I'm going to get our PowerPoint on.
And Val, could you turn up your volume just a hair? Apparently people are having a little trouble hearing.
I have got it up as loud as I can. Is that better?
Much better.
Okay, I think I'm just sitting too far away from the computer, so that must be it. And let me get this going and start the show here. Okay, so here we go. So for those of you new to United Policyholders, we're a charitable organization, nonprofit established 30 years ago after the Oakland Hills wildfires. We're a trusted information resource and voice for insurance consumers in all 50 states. As I mentioned earlier, we're not for profit, we're not for sale, we're funded by grants and donations. We don't take money from insurance companies. And the whole premise of our being is kind of to level that playing field between the insurance companies that have lots of resources, people on their payroll to help meet their needs and to help you meet your needs as a consumer filing a claim. We have Team Up, which is our professional staff, such as myself, Carrie and Carolyn, government and nonprofit partners, and then our volunteers, such as Neelam and Catherine, who are taking the expertise, their very hard-won expertise, and sharing it with you today to help you in your claim process. We have 3 programs: the Roadmap to Recovery, providing guidance on insurance, Roadmap to Preparedness, where we take those lessons learned post-disaster and share those with other people in the hopes that if they have a disaster, they're better prepared, and help them also to reduce risk. And then our Advocacy in Action is where we take those pain points that we discover in the Roadmap to Recovery program and help better protect insurance consumers' rights. Just key point here, we've got a lot of resources on our website, but we have this very handy dandy, the little yellow book, the Disaster Recovery Handbook. It's very bite-sized and manageable. Our website has a lot of great information. Sometimes it's overwhelming. So if you don't have this book, please send an email to this address to have a copy mailed to you. Fine print workshop today is intended to be general guidance only, not legal advice. Carrie and I, we are not attorneys. We don't play one on TV. We are simply here to help educate. So if you have a specific legal question, we always recommend you consult an experienced policyholder attorney. And just clarification, we're not creating a professional client relationship with any individual in this workshop. So as I introduced us earlier, here's our panelists for today. We're going to start out really briefly with a refresher on how contents claims works. Carrie, feel free to interject, and Catherine, Neelam, if you have something to share about this that you feel is helpful, please don't hesitate to pop in here. Big thing is just starting with the lingo. As you've all discovered, insurance is very complicated, confusing. It's a legal contract. It's got its own special alphabet and language. The key things to keep in mind here are replacement costs, which is also known as RC, actual cash value, ACV, and depreciation or holdback. Your personal property, that coverage C, that covers your contents. It's coverage C on all policies except for State Farm. So they call it policy, your coverage is B. It will be here on your DEX page. As I said, on State Farm, it's called coverage B. It'll be other personal property contents. Biggest things to know is knowing your limits. So you wanted to make sure that you've checked for sublimits, scheduled items, any endorsements, any extras that are going to increase the value of your contents. Speaking of special sublimits, here's some examples of what these look like. And this is all material we've covered in various workshops in the past. So again, this is just a really brief refresher just to set the stage for what we're going to be talking about. The big thing is focusing on the flow of your contents coverage. So you're going to receive advances. When the values are set, that's when you submit your inventory, you're going to receive those ACV, actual cash value payments. And then upon proof of expenditure, replacement repairs completed, you get those replacement cost payments to make you whole. RCV, the price it would actually cost to repair or replace that item. Most homeowners policies, but not all, are replacement cost policies. ACV is the pre-loss value. It's what that willing buyer would have been willing to pay you immediately before the loss. People also call it the Craigslist pricing. Sorry, my screen is advancing ahead of me here, so forgive me for that. The actual cash value is actually defined by a formula. It equals the replacement cost minus depreciation. And as I said earlier, your ACV is paid, then the replacement cost is paid. And this is the type of language you would find in your policy that calls that out. And then here's just a very simple formula to lay out how this works. So cost to buy the new couch, value of it before the fire, deduction in value due to wear and tear. So that's your ACV, your depreciation, and that's your replacement cost to make you whole. Depreciation, here's the definition for that. It's the loss of value due to wear and tear. These are other terms that you might see. Here's an example of third-party valuation. And just bear in mind, all of these things that you're seeing here, you will get the PDF of this PowerPoint. So don't feel like you've got to make notes. This information will be provided to you. Depreciation is negotiable. Be aware of things that should not be depreciated. So antiques, fine art, jewelry. And you can, there is no official standard. You can ask your insurer to give you a copy of what they're doing. And if the numbers seem unfair, like if everything is appreciated 70%, feel free to push back because the items you had may not have had that wear and tear. Yes, Carrie.
We have a question here that it fits right in with the depreciation slide. And I just want to let everyone know that if we have not answered your question that you've typed in, it's because we plan on answering it live like we're doing this one at the appropriate moment. So the question is to the panel, am I better off trying to calculate depreciation myself on the items on my inventory? If so, do you have advice or depreciation tables to recommend?
Neela,
Anyone?
your hand? Yeah.
Hi. What I was told to do, and I did not follow the directions I was given, I was told by a very reputable adjuster to put in replacement value on everything. And there were a lot of things, that I didn't know what the replacement values were. So I left them blank. Well, big mistake, because like sterling silver and stuff like that, I didn't know the current values. I had about 2,000 items, 2,200 items. And I left them blank, and they put in where I would say silver candlestick holders, they would write mercury silver and give $20 for it. Then you have to go back and fight and say no. So 2 people told me, put in the replacement value and then let them sit and go with depreciation, whatever. So that's something I would tell everybody. Put in the replacement value.
And just to clarify, I mean, what most insurance companies ask you for is a variety of things, including maybe if you have what you paid for it, if you can find receipts of what you paid for something. And while you want to cooperate and provide information that helps your adjuster get you your money, some of that information is beyond what you're required to provide. Just because they ask you for it, you don't necessarily have to provide so much detail. It's about what's important to provide to help document your loss. And Valerie will cover a lot of that. I'm going to drop some links in to the Q&A and the chat for you guys of some of our resources we have online about this very thing about depreciation.
Yeah,
But
thank you for that, Kara. Yeah, we do have some depreciation guides you can use. But you know, like Neelam was saying, a lot of it is, if you're going to replace the items, you've lost a lot of your documentation to prove that. You're only able to provide what you can, which is what it would cost to replace it, and perhaps some rough indication of when and where you purchased it and what that might be. So you know, focusing on that. And this example that I pulled back up just to point out, so this was the third-party valuation example of just like Neelam was saying, you know, it's something that she would say, okay, it was $90 here, right? This $90 example of the fine china bowl, right? And the price they put in was, you know, a different price. And so you're gonna, if whatever they give you, make sure that you're viewing it and correcting it so that you can make sure it reflects what you had. The example Carrie shared with me that stuck so very hard is the example of the Pyrex bowl versus the Waterford bowl. The dollar, you know, $10 versus $100+.
Yeah.
So making sure that not only does it reflect what you had, you know, a glass bowl can be very different depending on if you bought it at Walmart versus Target versus Macy's versus Pottery Barn, and being very clear what you had.
Yeah.
And what it would cost to replace that. So making sure that you have that information. You know, and I think that speaks to what Neelam was saying, the idea that it is negotiable. You're going to negotiate with what they give you. Now, of course, caution here, never intentionally claim items you did not have or inflate the value, the quality, or quantity, because insurance fraud, that intentional misrepresentation is a felony. So, however, will qualify, innocent mistakes are very common. They do not amount to insurance fraud. And like Neelam said, you know, the fact that your documentation and your proof of what you had most likely gone with your possessions. So the idea that you're going to be able to provide that specific detail for everything you owned it would be an incredible process that you could do that. And so, you know, staying ahead of where you are with that by just being very clear, these are the things I had, this is like items to replace it, like kind and quality. And as Carrie said, if you're able to provide receipts and invoices and bank statements and credit card statements that can prove some of that, you can give them what documentation you can, you know, but be aware that, you know, as Carrie mentioned, just because they ask for it, it doesn't mean you're going to actually be able to provide it to them. You can provide what's reasonable and what you actually have, but you're not going to be able to provide everything.
There's another question, Val, here that I think we can pull in right now, which is relevant in this area as well as in other things, which other aspects of your claim. But the question is, how much should I expect my insurance agent or adjuster to actually help me, with it, with documenting my loss and demonstrating my loss. So that's one open for you guys to answer.
Yeah, Neelam, anything to add to that?
Yes, I can answer this one and the other one. As far as the second question about how much can your adjuster help, it just depends. Mine, zero help. My insurance, my neighbor's insurance, they came and the woman walked around the ruins and said, "Oh, you had an oak bedroom set. That's $10,000. She hadn't spent 2,000 on it. She got everything because this adjuster was just writing these prices. I did not have that. I had to fight for everything. And what I was lucky, I had taken pictures of everything the year before because I had a lot of special things that had to go through the family, and I'd written notes for my children, and it was online. So I had pictures of everything. So, there was no problem documenting that I had this stuff. But they wanted me to write everything down. For someone who has a lot of stuff and don't write everything down. Do what you can. Tell them, look at that list and pay me on that. She made me work and work and work for 6 months and finally said, "Oh, you're way underinsured. You get all your money." Well, I could have got that, with a whole lot less work. So
No, you're right.
you do 2 months work and you're exhausted. I was exhausted. And just tell them, look at this, let's make the corrections, pay me on this, and then I'll move forward after a little rest. So don't let them wear you down.
Now, Catherine, do you want to go ahead and share yours? Because I think,
Sure.
yeah, and
Just
then
me-
while
Just
you're
to answer your
Yeah, go ahead.
questions. There we go.
And while you're pulling that up, I just want to share with people, if you have State Farm, and you should be able to ask them to provide someone to help you with your inventory. And if you've got a third party handling the contents and they won't, and they tell you they can't, then ask to speak to that State Farm supervisor. But I think Neelam's experience is probably typical. It just so much depends on your adjuster. And Catherine, let me go ahead and be quiet. You talk.
My adjuster basically sent me a spreadsheet, which I proceeded to modify. I had very bad insurance. My house was on a Post and Pier foundation, which gave farmers the excuse to send me to their subsidiary company, Foremost. And I basically got a coverage for the building and $22,500 in personal property. That's all that I had.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So my goal was to hit my limit. That was what I was after, and filling out the inventory. And I discovered that some things are easier and some things are harder. You can see that it's interesting. This is the total that I came up with. This is the cost to replace pre-tax. This is the amount they came up with. It's within $2,000. Even though the items, item for item, were vastly different, we all kind of came in about the same area. Then they added 9% sales tax. So that was my coverage. They depreciated it $41,000.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. So that was, they figured, they owed me $32,000, but less the amount over the limit. So they had paid me 75% up front, which is the farmer's thing. They paid that right away. But I wanted that $5,625.
Yeah.
So what I did was I put all this stuff together, and I'll show you quickly the way I did it. The stuff that in the box here is what they came up with, and I just inserted it into this spreadsheet. But for instance, anything that was over 10 years old, my stove was 14 years old. It was a Bosch stove. They discounted it 75%. just basically everything over 10 years old is discounted 75%. I listed cookware and I put in, I had about $179 in cookware. They didn't give me anything because they said they needed an itemized list. So if I were still trying to make my limit, I would have had to go back and list the saucepans and the fry pans, many of which I had replaced already because, you have to cook.
Yeah.
And so I could have said, well, I've already spent, and then they can not take the depreciation off of it. Once again, a mixed set of dishes. I estimated a couple of $100 to replace it. They needed an itemized list, so they didn't pay me anything. Mugs, however, I know. I figured I had 20 mugs. And, they paid me a reasonable amount and they didn't discount it 75%. They only discounted it halfway. Glassware, the same thing. They wanted an itemized list. Baking pans, bread pans, cake pans, cookie sheets. Oh, I did the cookie sheets separately and they did pay me for that.
So this is like so typical, unfortunately, of what we tend to see, and it depends on the company, depends on the adjuster, depends on the state, as to how much they're going to depreciate and mess with your list and how much detail they want from you to pay you. But our person that asked the last question about depreciation did a follow-up question, and I just wanted to address that, and that is, if you provide more information up front, like that it is a Bosch and it was in excellent condition.
I did.
Well, I know, and I'm using your example.
Condition.
It's really unfair depreciation, and you may have to argue it back. But the other thing, of course, that you can do is you can attach a link or make a copy of what a comparable quality to that item would cost today, and that is in excellent condition, and use that to make the argument. And Val's going to get into that in, more in her presentation, but a lot of times you can get an agreement ahead of time with the adjuster that you can group things together like mugs or cookware.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're going to want you to list every, stinking individual item. And what many people do now, and I don't know if Neelam did this or if you did this, Catherine, at all, but you go on to a common website and you start choosing things like you were buying them in your cart, or like you were doing a wedding or a gift registry, and you pick things that are equivalent to what you lost new, and start developing a list that you can use as part of your support. Then maybe all you have to argue is the depreciation side of it.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, they depreciated the food in my pantry and the food in my refrigerator by 50%.
They took the food without asking you to list what was mustard, what was ketchup, what was.
Yeah. Well, they did that. They did
Yeah.
that. And I figured I had, $320 worth of food, and they paid me
At least. You probably had much more than that.
Well, my favorite is the 1% discount on your slow depreciation on your slow cooker.
That's because it was 3 months old.
So another question that's come up, and that is people always ask appropriately, is what about a depreciation schedule? What is depreciation? How do they determine depreciation?
They seem to be very consistent through this whole thing, no matter what it was. If it was a couple of years, 20%. If it was 5 years, 45%. Anything over 10 years, well, here's a flatware set, 10 years old. They only depreciated that 50%.
No, but the numbers don't make any sense here. If they depreciated this 1%, Why is it gone from 39 to 21? 1% would be
Well, because
39 cents.
they priced it themselves. They didn't use my prices.
Yeah, but even then, 1% of 39.
I think
It
they
jumped-
found a crock pot and they found it for 1% more than
know.
$21.62.
Right. So,
Yeah.
you know, for those of you who maybe haven't dug into this yet, that are out there watching this and starting to have anxiety about sort of how all over the place it seems, the reality is there isn't a specific methodology for depreciation that is sanctioned in the insurance industry or by law. But in most states, they are required at least to share with you if you ask what method they're using.
Mhm.
And for example, in Colorado, now, if you present information that is valid from a valid source like Target or Bed Bath and Beyond or Nordstrom's or Walmart, you know, a retailer, a real live retailer, and you state what you know the condition and the usability is, the insurer is supposed to take that information into account. Unfortunately, what happens is once you get into this battle and it gets very complicated and you have so many line items, it can be very consuming, and that's what Neelam was talking about. So circling all the way back to that original question, what I would say is, you know, in hindsight, and many of the experts that do this for a living recommend that you make up your own list. You put your own values on there before you send it to them, and your own depreciation. It's one way of doing things. It's not necessarily the right way. But if you have the wherewithal and you're willing to do that, you can create your list. You can put your values, you can put the condition, kind of like Catherine did, and as much support as you can, and that gives you a good running start. They then have to argue your values instead of you arguing their values, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. But the reality is, even Catherine providing this, you can see they still went in and did their own pricing, right, Catherine?
Yeah, they did. What I had done was I started with my Amazon list, my orders list, and worked backwards. And then I put in, you know, the big items and so on. But where I got a lot of bang for my buck, let's see here, miscellaneous. This kind of surprised me. I had $1,500 in cash that was not covered at all.
No,
That was my stimulus payment.
no.
that I had
You
tucked it away against a rainy day.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's those sublimits that bite you when they have them in the policy. Yeah.
This I would have challenged if I hadn't hit my limit, because I called the people who sold this guitar to me, and they told me that the model now sells for $4,750. Mine was like new. It was in the original case, and they discounted it 75%. If you know anything about the price of musical instruments, they appreciate. They don't depreciate. I've seen the same guitar go for $7,000 and $8,000 on eBay. So that's something I definitely would have fought. I was willing to let the paintings go. It was original artwork, but it was from an art club. I liked it. But here's where I got a lot of bang for my buck. I said, okay, I had a lot of books. Most were in the bedroom. I had pictures of my bedroom so that I could show that I had all of these shelves. I knew the sizes of the shelves. And so I figured out, whoops, where'd it go? Come on.
Books.
This is great advice, everybody. Listen carefully.
Okay. There are 24 2-foot shelves holding a total of about 576 books at an average cost of $15. That comes to $8,640. They came up with somewhat of a different figure, But they gave me, and they said 50%, they gave me $6,000 for the book.
That's more than 50%, that's
It is.
75%.
Well, it's more than 50% of what I came up with, but they came up with more than that. So
Yeah.
in some of these cases, yeah, I had put a price there on this side, but their automatic thing coughed up a different example.
More.
The DVDs, the same thing. The DVD, I had pictures that were in my living room, and you can see them clearly in the background. You can see the shelves, you can see how many shelves were filled. So I figured out, I looked up on Google how wide a DVD case is, how many will fit on a 3-foot shelf. And I came up with 280 DVDs, which they discounted. I came up with $4,200. They only gave me $1,500. So their calculation was figuring 3,000 and not 4,000. My CDs, the same thing. I had pictures of, where are you here? The CD shelves were 3 feet wide, and each is 3/8 of an inch. And so each shelf holds 90 CDs, and I had 5 full shelves of CDs. That took me about 20 minutes. And that was $11,000 of.
Yeah, that's
was
the
half my-
kind of pearl that
Yeah.
you only learn through, most people only learn through this kind of forum or from talking to other people who have been there and done that, unless you happen across it. Sometimes the things you think that have very little or no value turn out to be easy to document and bring a great amount of value to your total ability to recover what you have to work with the insurance company. And the story about the guitar, I was telling Val, I had someone who had just rental insurance because they were renting when the fire burned everything, and they had $50,000 limit, and were just in a bad way, and not in a position of, it was someone who was older and who had some disabilities and really couldn't handle this kind of inventory list. And out of grace, it turned out that a cousin had given her a statue, an art statue, many years before that was destroyed. And that cousin had ended up being a famous sculptor in Colorado. And she was able to recover all $50,000 of her resources from the insurance policy with that one item. Now that's unusual, but the lesson to be learned from that is if you think through here as you're doing your list, whatever method you pick to do your list, if you start with your Amazon account, or if you start one room at a time, or if you start with, from the outside, the outside in or whatever, think about the items that would be difficult to replace that might actually have more value than you would imagine. And this adds to one of the questions, or goes towards one of the questions we have here to answer, which is someone asks, they had many, many tools that were over 10 years old, but had a lifetime warranty. So I know a lot of the Craftsman tools from long ago and other brands, it's very hard to get that quality of tool now. And so how do you value that, and how does the lifetime warranty come in? Val, do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I mean, the point with that one is because they're wanting, they're trying to avoid it being depreciated. And so for that specific question, definitely putting in what that replacement cost would be for that caliber of tool right now. So if it's Craftsman, what is it going to be replaced at now? I would just put, the details, include the lifetime warranty, and put the replacement costs, and provide, and just say it was in excellent condition. Not getting into how old it is.
Yeah. What I did when I priced, I had a lot of tools. I've been buying and rehabbing houses for over 50 years. And you can see that, the tools were 30 years old, 35 years old, over 20 years old. They were in very good condition. And of course, and nice, they didn't appreciate them 100%, but they did depreciate them 75%. What I did here, I went to Home Depot and I walked through the aisles, and when I saw a tool that I had, I wrote down the tool and the price. And that's where I got the prices. And it was better than trying to scratch my head and figure out, what was in that box and what was hanging on the wall there and so on. But there were many things that I would have challenged here. A reciprocating saw and blades, Milwaukee saws, they're expensive. I estimated $125. That was a set. That was not sold separately. That came as a set, the saw and the blades. So I would have challenged that. I would have said, no, that's a thing. And here's a link to it. And it's a set in a box with the saw and the blades, and it costs $125. Once again, I had a bunch of painting equipment. God, rollers, painting pans, stirring sticks, all those things that you just, why, I only wanted $100 for it, but nothing, I got nothing for that. Here's something else though. I had a mechanics tool set that I bought at my local lumber store. I estimated $150. They estimated at $700.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but then they gave me 50% of it. So I actually got more,
On that
than I asked for there. I had
Same with your sawhorses, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. The Smith and Hawken, that's a very high quality gardening tool thing. Those were over 30 years old and they were absolutely pristine. They called it a barley fork. I don't know, but both of those cost originally over $100, and they discounted them 25%.
So let's actually let me pop us. Let's continue. Well, you've got this up. This is great for leading into next steps after you submit your inventory, Catherine, because this is exactly, you keep alluding to the fact of challenging it, right? Carrie, do we have any other depreciation questions before we?
Oh, yes, we have many.
All right, let's get those knocked out before we go.
Okay, so here's one as a follow-up on State Farm's Contents Collaborator spreadsheet. There's no pull down for antiques. I don't think, just condition, new, very good, etc. And there are several people who have asked in here, like they're getting pushback. Here's one. Under what insurance regulation or law are antiques, fine art, or jewelry not depreciable? Our adjuster suggested going to comparable furniture. So I guess new furniture. Again, it's State Farm. Would finding an appraiser be helpful in estimating a replacement cost for antique furniture?
So appraisers are helpful if you have documentation. So you have photos, you have, that bill of sale, you're able to get those things to show you what comparable would be. And I would say comparable furniture is going to be comparable antiques, not contemporary furniture.
Right.
And if you don't have that option in the drop down, if you look at Catherine's example of the drop leaf kitchen table, she just put over there antique at the end. So make it part of the name of the item.
200 years old.
When you would get it back, the whole point of that would, you see it's zero depreciated because it is an antique.
And they gave me twice what I put down as the price for it.
Right, because they probably, they have they do some pricing,
Yeah, they pulled some antique thing that they had in their reference thing, and they just pulled. I'm sure this is a program that does this. I don't think it's a person who's actually sitting there, tapping it out. But in that case, I did okay. But then I had another inherited thing that I don't know if I can find it right now, but they did depreciate it. So, it's not consistent.
But then one other thing, if someone replaces something, then you've got that new receipt to be able to get the full price for it.
Right, which is where I wanted to talk about those next steps after you submit your inventory. Yeah.
Here's two more inherited items. One was 100 years old, one was 120. They depreciated in both 75%.
Yeah.
So I would have challenged that.
Yeah, I think, we're dealing with a lot of different possible things here. First of all, you are dealing with software programs and certain words trigger certain things. Secondly, you're dealing with a lot of inexperienced adjusters, or this has been fished out to people who have potentially not been really trained to understand the nuances of what you might have owned.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot at play. It's not always intentionally dastardly, but the result can be painful. And so as you develop your list, or you develop your sort of pushback, maybe you've already done a list, you've sent it to them, they've sent it back to you, and they've changed everything and depreciated it, and you're, dealing with that. Do your best to do a lot of the things Catherine's showing here, and even, additionally, maybe if you'd said solid cherry chest of drawers,
I should have said
that
antique. I should
Yeah,
have said
antique.
or antique, yeah.
Yeah,
Antique,
or 1870 or something, or go online and find
It's got
something
the year, yeah. I mean,
that looks just, really close, giving information like mahogany or solid cherry, or the fact that it is a collectible or an antique or a one of a kind or something like that. Those types of words help perhaps trigger the right behavior. And if they don't, then at least they're there for you to use to push back.
so yeah, so like Catherine was saying, using that word antique in your item description, if you don't have that option on the drop down, and then whatever that pricing is, if you can avoid the cost of the appraiser, you can certainly try. I did a restoration inventory for a friend, and I ended up calling a couple of antique shops and just saying, here's what I'm trying to do. If I give you, rough descriptions or photos, can you tell me what you would charge to provide something similar, like kind and quality, right? And that they just basically said, here's our catalog and here's the stuff. It's not something they would share with the general public, but because I was able to represent what I was doing, I was able to get some solid information on the pricing.
Yeah, sometimes it's just, if you don't want to pay an appraiser, some good detective work is really what most appraisers do, unless they're very unique items. So if you had rugs, for example, perhaps you had some, Persian rugs or Native American Indian, or Pakistani or whatever, valuable, unique works of art rugs. You don't want them valuing that as though it were a polyester throw rug. So as much as you can try to find something that is demonstrably the same as what you lost, that is of much higher value than that polyester throw rug, then the more likely you are to get the resources from that you should, to try to be able to replace it, or at least recover what you feel you lost.
Yeah, I came up with these values because when I inherited it, I had them appraised. It was part of my job as the executor of my mother's will to appraise, expensive items. And so I knew pretty much what they were appraised for 29 years ago. And I would have been happy to, I of course lost all that paperwork in the fire, but I've been happy to sign a thing that said, I swear that this is, true to the best of my knowledge, and so on and so forth. Here's something else. I had a lot of sewing and embroidery supplies. They wanted an itemized list of everything.
Oh my gosh.
410 needles,
Yes.
882 pins,
So
4 pin cushions.
the trick on that one is, like, if you're signed up at a Michael's or a Joann's and you've got that customer reward, they're tracking your behavior when they give you that discount. They might be able to pull your stuff, but the trick another CZU survivor did is she called her fabric store that she went to, and she said, what I've been buying over the years. If I had to replace everything like I do now, what would it cost me? And they just created her a shopping list.
That'd be great.
And so this is what it would cost to replace what I had.
these sort of like cluster tricks where you can pull from relationships you have with certain businesses, or just sit down, like for example, the spices and the cleaning products that you would have in your pantries.
Oh, gee.
You can get on, I mean, here it would be a city market, or again, a Walmart or Target or whatever. You get on one of those websites and you just like act like you're going shopping for everything you had, your food, your toiletries, and create that list then by category.
Right, and that the information on how to do that kind of stuff is in the previous contents webinars that we've done, and we'll make sure we put those in the chat for everybody to follow. Catherine, anything else you want to share on this before I pop this back over to the PowerPoint deck? Because then I do need to talk about more about challenge stuff.
This is something I replaced, and if I hadn't figured I was going to hit my limit, I would have gone through. I replaced my sweatpants, my sweatshirts. I replaced my shoes and socks. I had Amazon order things for all of that stuff. And I bought a smaller bed for something like $480. And I would have put replaced for $480. And then presumably they would have had to pay me for that replacement cost, because I did have replacement cost. And that was kind of in my back pocket. I thought, if I don't come up with enough money that I think I'm going to hit my limit or be over my limit, I would have, I bought a new pair of Levi's and so on. $32 doesn't buy a pair of Levi's. And I lost two.
Neelam, I see you've got your hand up.
This is something I found out right at the end. So my insurance company was horrible, horrible, horrible. They were driving me crazy. And people kept telling me, see a lawyer. I didn't want to see a lawyer because that would make it very adversarial. And I was trying to work with them. But I finally did go and see a lawyer. And the first thing he asked me is, do you have a second home? Now, all my insurances were with one company, one agent. And I said, yes, I do. He said, you've got some more in contents. My contents were worth a lot. And I said, what are you talking about? Yeah, I bring a few things from, the second home into my home, and I take a few things back. But, that's a couple of $1,000 at the most, things going back and forth. And he said, no, there is 10% of the contents from your secondary home will be paid to you. And I thought he was nuts. And he was right. And apparently that is for everybody. My agent didn't tell me. The insurance company didn't tell me. So finally, when they said, we are done with your contents, you're way underinsured, we're sending you the check, I said, what about the 28,000 from the other thing? What are you talking about? I said, I've got this other home covered by you that you haven't informed me about. They paid me that so fast. I cannot tell you how fast. So apparently that was something they could have gotten into trouble for, not having informed me. So anybody who's listening, if you have a second home, there is contents coverage that carries over to your first home loss. Second thing I was told by my adjuster, that those limits, those sub-limits for jewelry and silver do not apply in a fire. Everything goes into the pot.
It really depends on your policy language. So that example we showed before, the limit on jewelry was on theft. It said,
that's on theft. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the sub-limits only apply to theft, but certain ones like cash.
Cash, you got zero. I got zero on cash.
Fungible, that they apply even in fire. It's just too hard to be able
Yeah.
to argue,
Yeah.
I guess.
And
I
I
don't-
understand that. I have
It was-
just come back from England, and the exchange rate was so wonderful
Hmm.
that the last day I changed another $500 worth of pounds and brought it with me. I said, the next time I'll have this money because the exchange is that all burnt.
Yeah. I had my house robbed about 40 years ago. And I did have cash there, and they paid me, I think, up to $1,000 they would pay in cash.
Oh,
I didn't expect that. I was talking to the adjuster on the phone, and I said, well, I had about $800 in cash, but I don't suppose you'll cover that. And he says, oh yeah, it's covered up to $1,000. And that was 35, 40 years ago.
It so depends on your policy
But
language.
that was theft. Yeah,
Right.
I'd been
Yeah.
burgled, so yeah. One other thing I wanted to point out is I wanted $400 for lost prescriptions. Well, they wanted them, they couldn't price prescriptions. So I should have itemized, and I also should have put down, yes, I had to have them replaced. Those were my medications. And I called my doctors while I was evacuated and got my prescription sent over to Walgreens. So once again, if I had not been able to hit my policy limit, I would have itemized those things. And this is what I paid to replace those prescriptions. So I think that's probably most of what I've got here. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Right, let me pop back
There
here.
we go.
Sorry, I'm gonna make sure I hit the right number here.
There we
Right,
go.
So next steps after you submit your inventory, and this, hopefully this is where a lot of you are. There we go. So first thing to know is, as Catherine was saying, if your loss exceeds that policy limit, then they should pay your claim out, fully resolve it without any need to submit any replacement receipts, right? And so Catherine, by the time she got her list done and she got her inventory approved, they did the depreciation, she was paid out to her policy limits. And so, you shouldn't have to keep submitting receipts after you hit your policy limits. That's one of the things that we want to call out. And as Catherine and Milan were saying, age is not everything. That condition matters, should be as important as age, right? And so you want to argue on the remaining life expectancy of an item, not its age per se. And here's our example of the aging condition, right?
Yeah.
Dogs, and I will swear to it, dogs and cats and children destroy furniture. People who live in a house, probably not so much. Pricing matters, again, not using sales prices, using what it costs to replace. Even when they're sending you back that list, just like Catherine showed you, when they're showing you that it costs this, they're saying this. If she hadn't hit her policy limits, you heard her, she would have been battling with them to get paid for what she said it was worth. She would have challenged that, because that is negotiating.
And
Yeah.
that's really kind of keeping your eye on the prize, which can be hard to do because these things, a lot of them have a lot of emotional connection and meaning. So it's kind of easy to get twisted up about that Waterford bowl that might have come from, many generations down. But at the end of the day, if you're going to get full payment out, then what they pay on individual items or how much they try to appreciate those items won't matter. The problem is you don't know if you're going to reach your limits until you reach your limits.
Yeah.
And just remember that in most states you have a reasonable amount of time to work on this, and hopefully get some back and forth. You'll get a feeling for whether you're going to get to your limits or not.
Right. And so here's an example, just like Catherine's, of what that looks like, right? I know one of the questions we had was how, focusing, the adjuster had made the advice of focusing on the larger items. And so I would say it's the larger, and like Catherine did, it's that bulking of items. If you had 500 books and you've got photos to back that up, it's very easy to put that in. You don't need to list all the titles. You have the photo proof to say, this is what I had. And you saw her numbers that added up, even to 50% depreciated. That was one item listed to cover 500 items, gave her over $6,000. And if she hadn't hit her limit, she could have argued for, excessive depreciation, because unless you have small children handling your books, for the most part, those books are in incredible condition.
I would have
Right,
definitely,
and
I would have definitely argued the DVDs and the CDs because those were pristine. They had the inserts and everything.
And
they were-
another question that was asked was if it was a second home, so it wasn't used nearly as often as a primary home, then those belongings were in better condition or should have a longer life. Should you argue that? Sure, you should argue that. Anything that leads or gives justification or helps explain why your things were more valuable or should retain their value is worthwhile putting into your documentation.
And then, all right, I'm going to give us a deep breath here really fast. We're going to go ahead.
Sorry, but that person who said their second home burnt and they have the, you just mentioned the thing, they might check their first home might carry some content coverage for their second home.
That is
Just like
such a
mine did.
good tip. That is such a good tip. And there's
It's huge. It's huge. I
And,
got $28,000 more because
yes,
of that. No one mentioned it to me. Not my agent, not the insurance company. Nobody mentioned it till I went to this lawyer, and he mentioned it in the first 5 minutes of sitting with me.
yeah, that's a great point. There are hidden amounts of money. And this is where reading, as painful as it is, reading the policies can open up some additional doors for more resources too. Also, if you had family members or people that had belongings on your property, some policies allow a certain amount. It may be limited to $10,000 or something like that, but for that property as well. So that's another one that can lie within the policy language.
Mm.
All right, and I'm going to hop through this section really quickly. As I said, this PowerPoint will be provided to you as a PDF, so you're able to reference these. These are just contents claims in your state. My apologies for the dogs barking if you can hear them. Washington, the definition of actual cash value has to be very clear. Depreciation in the state of Washington is determined by physical deterioration and obsoleteness, not by age. Colorado has, all relevant factors must be included. Here's the regulations about this: measurable difference in market value. Sorry, that was California. Let me go back to make sure I'm saying what I'm saying. Now that this is laws about advances. Most of you, as you saw with Catherine, she had her advance. She was trying to capture those dollars beyond that. A Colorado law for the primary home is 30% advance. Here's the information on that. Your deadlines as well. Not going to touch on these. This is just for your information, so you have them. Oregon, here's your fair claim settlement practices regulations. California's expedited handling. California doesn't have a requirement in the legislation for the previous fires of an initial contents advance. The insurance commissioner makes a recommendation recommending that. And so for the 2020 fires, it was 25%. At least. Catherine, I believe you said your insurer provided 75%.
Yeah.
And then these are the insurance companies for the California 2020s that were offering some kind of advance.
Yeah, the insurance commissioner of the state of California requested insurance companies to give 100% of personal property in the case of total loss, but they didn't do it. So some of them approached it, but they were not going for it.
And let me touch on this question really quickly, because we've talked about it in a very indirect way, and I know it's one of the questions we have. In that, you know, you have a replacement cost policy. Why are they paying you only that? Why are they doing the depreciation and cash and providing you only the ACV? And it really is, it's what is in your loss settlement provisions, and that say what they owe you, right? And so they're going to hold back the depreciation. And this is what it looks like in your policy. The items that are circled are the language that you're looking for. And then here's another example of that. And so this is why they're doing it. And here's a State Farm example. And it, you know, it's called out as a limited replacement. And then let me stop sharing. Carrie, I know we've got more questions.
Yes, we do. I'm just kind of popping some of the answers in there, but this is a good one that kind of was touched on a little bit, but I think we can give a better, more complete answer. We have someone asking, at what point do we enlist an attorney? We are already getting pushback concerning the personal contents list, even though we completely lost everything, State Farm insurance. And I just wanted to say about this, you can do what Neelam did, and you can talk to an attorney and get advice without entering into an agency agreement or starting the process where your attorney represents you with the insurance company. You can also sometimes get legal advice in other forums, like we have oftentimes in these events. We will have policyholder attorneys that will answer questions, and we sometimes have legal clinics to give some advice. It's a personal decision when you bring an attorney in, but I know I always like to tell people, no one, whether it's an attorney, a public adjuster, or a great adjuster for the insurance company, no one is going to be able to document your loss 100% for you. You will still have to participate in the process. And if you're able to do that documentation, you're then able to keep 100% of what you recover from the insurance. So we are here to try to help people be able to do that on their own initially, and you know, without having to share with a professional. But when you reach that point where it's no longer feasible, then there are other options, such as attorneys or professional public adjusters that can help you document your loss and keep pushing it forward.
Right. And where a lot of people will start is they will start with an attorney ghostwriting a letter for them. So it's very legalese written, and it's calling out where they feel the insurance company is falling down. And it's kind of giving them that chance to step up and do the right thing. And so on the screen right now, I've got our Find Help directory, which is on our website at that address that you see here. Which is a resource for you with professionals that help with policyholder issues. And then one of the questions that we had that came in on email today was finding help actually doing the inventory. So like I mentioned before, if you've got State Farm, you can ask for someone to help you with it. We have on our website, we have sample spreadsheets that you can use. A lot of times people will, if you're on Facebook in one of the groups in your community that's, working on the fire issues, a lot of times people will share theirs as an example for you to modify and create your own. Just, of course, being aware that you need to, it needs to represent what you had. You're not copying and pasting someone else's. And one of the other things is you can push them hard. And we have sample letters on our website to ask to have it waived, or will they pay you out, or figuring out what that number is, that you will give them what you've got. And you're like, if you will pay me this, can we just be done? And those are all legitimate things to do.
the one thing that we want to make sure we remember to touch on is there is help through your regulators in your state. It's limited. In Colorado, it's the division the Division of Insurance, the Department of Regulatory Agencies. And that you can file a complaint online. You can call and talk to one of their representatives and explain what you're struggling with. And your tax dollars go for toward these regulators trying to basically give you some assistance and hold the insurance companies accountable to the regulations in your state. And while they will not act as your adjuster or as your lawyer, they do have the ability to take your complaint and write a letter to your insurance company and raise the level of the eyes that are on your claim. So one of the questions that we had was, had to do with the fact that they're just not, getting the claim service that they think they should get. And there's been a lot of that in these Colorado 2020 fires, a lot of long time between submitting information and getting any answers back, or just feeling like you're getting ghosted. Well, making a complaint to your Division of Insurance is one way that you can get their attention. They are not allowed to take a negative action against you because you complain. And I've seen many, many cases where doing this, filing a complaint, has helped get things moving in a positive direction. Maybe it helps you change to a better adjuster, or they just look and decide they're going to go ahead and help you and get your claim moving. We have another question that has to do with that. After filing a complaint with the Oregon Insurance Commission, I finally started a conversation with the new adjuster. However, I still do not receive timely answers to questions, most of the time not at all. And getting documents is virtually impossible. Do I have another recourse to get them to address my issues? My advice on that would be to follow up with your insurance commission and copy the insurance company. Go up the chain of the insurance company. I'm going to put some links in the chat about resources we have that will help explain how to do that.
And you've also got, I know for Oregon especially, you have a really strong disaster legal aid resource in your state. So I would reach out to your legal aid for the state and ask them if they have, that way you can potentially get a free attorney that will at least help you shape what you're going to write. Neelam, I see you had your hand up, sorry.
Yes, one of the things, if it would help people who are still making their lists of contents, take one room, visualize that room, go from one end of that room to the other end, and then turn and go the other side. I had a bed here. What was on the bed? Mattress, bed, cover, sheets, how many pillows, just visualize that room, go into that room and start listing the items.
Yeah, I wish I'd had more pictures. I had backup hard drives on both of my desktop computers and they burned up along with the computers, but I had cloud storage and I was able to go and get a lot of the pictures that I'd taken of the house. And I wish I'd taken, it kept going into my, I should get up and just, put the iPhone on video and just look at everything. And I never did it. I wish I had done it. But I did look at those pictures. Well, it was a hard thing to do. It's hard to look at what you had, in the good old days. But I went back and I looked at those pictures, and that's when I realized how many books I had, how many CDs, how many DVDs. I could have even, I had pictures of the mugs hanging up. I could have backed up each one of those 20 mugs I claimed.
I wanted to also let you guys know that in the chat, I'm putting some links for some partial loss tips. There's several questions in that people have typed in the Q&A where they have not lost everything, but maybe had things partially burned or damaged and are going through the struggles of trying to figure out what's repairable, cleanable, replaceable. That's a whole nother session or three. But these publications on our website are a great start. And we have several recorded sessions that go into great detail on this where you can watch. So this would be a great place to start looking at that to get your head around how to respond to your insurer who's pushing back on items that are damaged versus destroyed.
Yeah, someone asked a question about how long we have to do this. I got a different answer every time I asked the question. First of all, they kept, every 2 weeks I'd get an email from an adjuster saying, where's your inventory? And I'm going, I'm in a motel. I'm not going to do that now. I'm doing 1,000 other things. I'm trying to find a place to live and I'm trying to replace my clothes. And I was just not ready to sit down and do an inventory. Finally, somebody said I had 2 years to do it. Then I got a letter from the insurance company that said, I got it in July and it said, as of August 27th, it will be 1 year since we paid you 75% of your limit. So we need the inventory before that 1 year mark. And I would have challenged that because I had been told by another adjuster that I had 2 years. But I decided to just get the thing done. And so that's what spurred me to getting it done. But ask that question a lot because you're going to get a different answer whoever you talk to.
Yeah, and I put, I answered roughly. So for California, you've got 36 months to be paid your benefits from your first ACD payment. You can ask them if there's anything in your policy that creates a timeline. The policy language that I've seen for the most part in most states is that it's in a timely manner, and that's not necessarily defined. So, if they're telling you something else is timely, I think Catherine's argument is very valid. I need to find a place to live. I need to figure out how I'm going to replace my home, and I will work on the inventory when I've taken care of my basic needs. Now, one of the questions I've seen pop up a couple of times. So if you had an advance that adds up to more than what you can recall for your contents, you don't have to return. That's not an overpayment because quite honestly, you probably got a lot of contents that you're not remembering. I have a friend who lost her home in 2003 and she was finding stuff every year. Anytime she'd go visit somebody in the family, she would be, oh, I had this and I had this. And so you're most likely not recalling, which is understandable, everything that you had in your home that was contents. However, to get paid over that advance, you do have to, like Catherine said, submit that inventory and or submit those receipts for reimbursement for the items that you've already replaced. As far as corroboration, pricing or photographs, what I would say, like with, I think Carrie or Neelam mentioned, like when you go shopping, to do the pricing, like if you're going to Home Depot, take your little gun, scan and make your list, print it, PDF it, and you can provide that for this is pricing documentation to replace what I had. If you have photos, it's worth providing them. I don't give them originals of anything you have, receipts, anything. Give them, give it to them either electronically or give it to them as a copy. But you want to keep for your records anything you're submitting. So in case it gets lost, because sometimes things do get lost, or as I've seen in the questions coming in, somebody was already on their 9th adjuster. And so bearing in mind that all records might not convey with that person. So if they haven't asked for it, you can offer, you can keep it for backup documentation. If you're doing pricing or replacement on your own, doing it on the web, just, instead of printing the page you see, you can do a PDF, you can do a screenshot, and just put those in a folder so that you have them. And just going back to that idea of getting help with your inventory, if you can't get it waived, or you can't get them to negotiate with you of, if I turn this in, can I be paid this percentage and can we call it done? Whatever that is that works for you. Reaching out to friends, family, church, borrowing somebody's college student who's got those tech skills and knows how to work Excel and can do that work for you. It's easier to have somebody who's a digital native go in and make that work for you. The time they will spend versus the time you would spend doing it is huge. And then your job is just like when you submit it to your insurance company, is to figure out, are there any errors? Are there any corrections? Anything missing? That kind of stuff. So bear in mind that.
Yeah, and also for those of you that haven't started yet, because there are some of you here I've seen in the Q&A, you don't have to do it perfectly 100%, at the first pass. I mean, people remember things. My neighbor lost her home in the fire where I live now, in the same fire where my home was damaged. And I was just speaking to her about this today. She now, almost 10 years later, still remembers things she lost. And this happens to all of us, but it's okay. And we're all human. And you can, make a good solid first pass at a room or a few rooms, and then, come back at it again. You can bring in that help, like Val said. One of the other stories that I like to share is I have a friend whose son, who was just in college at the time, happened to be there when their house burned down, and they evacuated. And from their hotel room, he had his computer, and he had, just been learning Excel or something. And he basically sat with them for like a week. And right away, they did their contents, a good part of their contents inventory. They had no idea that their son would have that ability to really step in and help in that way. I've seen many cases, friends helping friends, and this is part of what we do. We have these great resources. We have our survivor to survivor forums on two Tuesday nights a month, right, Val?
Yeah.
And that's where you will get the wisdom of people like Catherine and Neelam and many others, and what worked for them, both in documenting their contents lost and in just managing the amount of work and pressure and emotional turmoil that comes with those responsibilities. So you do generally have a reasonable, relative to some of your other deadlines now, certainly in Colorado and California, to work on that contents list. And you want to pay attention to those deadlines. But again, you don't necessarily have to build Rome in a day. You can work on it a good chunk at a time, and come back and revisit it. They're not going to just write partial on any checks you deposit, and keep after it as long as you can until you reach your maximum or you're out of stuff.
Yeah. And on the screen now, you see, the resources that we have that are available to you for this. One of the things to point out, and it's one of our Thomas Fire survivors, Nancy, had shared, her goal was to do a page every week. So she did a page a week, and she said she had to flip the way she did it to just being a transaction, right? She said it was the most anybody was paying her for her time. Because she had just retired right before the fire. And so she said, every page I made, I looked at how much I was going to be paid for that. And that was the most money anybody was paying me at the time. And so she just kind of turned it into, this is a job, it's just a job, because it's painful.
I want to add one thing, if I may. I'm not interrupting, but
No, go ahead.
you know, you were talking about spreadsheets. For people who don't know how to do Excel and all that, I hand wrote on a form, and I just wrote, you know, the item, you know, the condition, where I bought it, a little narrative, and replacement cost. That's all I put in. And
Mhm.
they then transcribed and typed and did all that stuff. I hand wrote, you know, I don't know, 200 pages or 300 pages
Right.
of this stuff. So you can handwrite it, you know, you don't have to do it their way. They want it in a spreadsheet, tell them to send an assistant who will do that for you, you know.
Well, and the same for, I know some of the CZU survivors have been battling with, they have to send things electronically and the files are too big and they don't know how to do it. And it's like,
No.
just give me an address that I can mail the copies to you. You know,
Yeah.
and you can make that point. I don't have these resources. Most people don't have the computer, the printer, all of this stuff, or the skills to do this. So tell them what you're able to do and ask them to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people kept asking me for things to print out. I had my computer with me, and it was a kind of a fluke that I actually took it with me
Yeah.
because I didn't evacuate from the fire. I evacuated from the smoke. I didn't know my house was going to burn down. So I didn't take any of that stuff. But I didn't have a printer. I didn't have a place to put a printer. You know,
Right.
how am I supposed to print this thing out for you?
Yeah.
And the libraries are closed because of COVID. I mean, I
Right.
could have gone to the library.
No,
I
no,
mean, it's like,
it's true.
there's no way to do. You can't ask me to do this.
Right. And if your best is a hand list, then that's what it is. You give them what you can and ask for their help. I'm going to run through really quickly. I know hopefully everybody has seen these. These are just the different libraries that we have to help you with different parts of your claim. And then because I want to get us out of sharing my screen, and these are for anybody needing help. These are some you know, distress hotlines. I know Carolyn had already put this, I think, in the chat. These are you know, workshops going on. We do have a pricing party this Saturday, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You bring your list, your pricing. We're going to help you figure out resources to do that and pair you up with other people so you can kind of work together and do some dividing and conquering. Since with COVID, it's really hard to get together in person the way we used to do these. And then quickly calling out, just thank you to our funders for Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, California. As Carrie mentioned earlier, we have our Survivor Forums the first and third Tuesday of the month. You know, please take advantage of those. And then signing up for, you know, to get information, and then we will be sending out the link to today's webinar and also the PDF. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Carrie, do you have any more questions?
I don't think so. I think we've addressed all the questions that came in to some extent anyway. One that I will share and that I just put a link in to the chat for is someone was saying that they really want to request a waiver and just, you know, like they have nothing left but a pile of ashes and they just want State Farm to pay them the limits that are due them. And as Catherine mentioned, there have been times in the past where the California regulatory department has asked insurers to do this, but they don't have the power to force insurers to do this. We always ask in our surveys how many people were able to get this to happen. And it's a small percentage, but it doesn't hurt to ask. If you have extenuating circumstances, it doesn't hurt to ask. And so there is a letter there, the publication sample letter asking for a waiver of contents itemization requirement. Also, at any given time, you can ask your insurer to give you, ask in writing, and they're required to comply with this, a sort of a status check on your policy. Where you're asking them to give you the evidence of what they've paid, what they've denied to date. And I feel that doing that periodically is a good idea because it kind of keeps them on their toes. It keeps them looking at your claim. And if they're not responding to that request, that in itself is a valid reason to file a complaint with the Division of Insurance, saying, you know, I've asked for this information. I'm trying to do my due diligence and keep pushing my claim forward, and I've not gotten a response in 30 days. You know, we have found this year, as frustrating as it's been for many people, that the Division of Insurance has been able to get claims moving in many cases, and it has even levied some interest charges against certain insurers for taking too long to pay people once they have given a complete documentation of their loss. So, so they do help sometimes. And then, you know, you can hopefully get things moving again and keep pushing forward with your recovery.
So Catherine, Neelam, anything you want to share with the group?
I think we pretty much covered it. It's been a good session.
Well, I thank you both for your time. Like I mentioned, anybody who stuck on getting the pricing and getting that moving to get that documentation, please join us on Saturday. That will not be recorded because it's going to be a working kind of meeting. We'll have breakout rooms. So for people wanting to work on pricing tools, so put you in a room working on the tools. The same for, you know, crafts and kitchen and whatever else we've got, depending, it's all going to depend on the people who come to the meeting. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for our funders and for our guests tonight, our guest panelists. Appreciate you. I wish you the best of luck with this process, and I'm going to be quiet and let Carrie say her goodbyes, and then I'll let Carolyn close us down.
Thank you. I just want to encourage you to stay connected. It's hard in these times we're in now with, you know, restrictions on and off and all of those complications. Everything is a little bit more complicated, but please consider these sessions and the Survivor and our website as a connection resource for you. There are lots of people who have been through what you're going through, and they understand, and it's a way for you to connect and get pearls of wisdom from these lovely people who have learned this wisdom the hard way.
Hard ways, right?